Welcome back to the morning show. Here on Arise News, I'm Nkechi Nana.
I'm Rafai Hussaini.
And I'm Sheto Atigari.
The African Renaissance Organization, a human rights advocacy group, has sent a petition to the United States Department of State over the continued detention of rights activist Ughelli Sowore.
All right, the group is urging the United States government to prevail on the Nigerian government, led by President Muhammadu Buhari, to immediately and unconditionally release Sowore and all others arrested during the revolutionary protest of August 5th, 2019, across most parts of the country.
Kelly Buluku, a lawyer and self-acclaimed social reformer who made a bid for the Ughelli Federal Constituency seat in Delta State during the last elections and currently head legal operations of the African Renaissance Organization.
He will be joined on the same panel by Peniela Akintujoye, Senior Counsel, Caritas Law and Partners, a rights activist and currently the Director of Media Communications at African Renaissance Organization.
Both men will be discussing the threat by a group to protest on Friday, the 30th of August by 6 p.m. Nigerian time at the Nigerian Embassy in Washington, D.C. in support of incarcerated convener of the hashtag Revolution Now movement, Ughelli Sowore. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'll start with Mr. Buluku. Let's start with why you think the arrest and detention of Sowore, who is the convener of this revolution, well, the Revolution Now protest. Why do you think the arrest and detention of Sowore is wrong?
Well, as a lawyer, I have to look at it from the legal perspective. The truth of the matter is that the right to protest is inherently enshrined in our Constitution and is also enshrined in international protocols, international conventions. And it's not just here in Nigeria. Protests have been held in other countries. In Hong Kong right now, there's a protest going on. Even in the United States, in the wake of Trump's election in 2016, there were protests across the streets, protesting by those who felt they shouldn't have emerged as a winner of the election. So that right is sacrosanct. It cannot be taken away. And if a person feels aggrieved the way things are going in the country, he has the right to embark on protest, not just himself, but also to amass the citizens of this country to join him in that action, so that they can draw attention to what is going on in the country and then seek remedies for that action.
So now that this detention is being backed by the authority of the court, do you think that we should be undergoing a legal process to maybe reverse this detention or seek a bail while he's awaiting trial?
Well, we can actually do both. We can actually pursue the legal process, which is, of course, what Falana is doing right now. He has filed an application to set aside the order of the court. But we can also embark on a protest. And that is what our organization is doing in the United States, to call attention of the international community to the arbitrary arrest and detention of Ughelli Sowore, and to ensure that it stops, because it is not just him. There are a couple of other activists who are also being held. And we want to put a stop to this madness, because if it's not stopped, the likelihood is that it's going to continue and it's going to destroy the image of this country. And so we believe that it's high time that we put a stop there, because it's, come to think of it, the president of this country, back in 2011, called for a protest, called for a revolution, and now the convener of this protest is saying, let's toe the same path, let's do the same thing. Let us call attention to what is going on in this country. Let us make some demands that must be met. And somebody is saying
Let me quickly interject and take you. I think a lot of that call for protest has been really misinterpreted a lot, because it was a call for protest and a revolution through the ballot box.
Yeah.
But in this case, and that was what the president, I'm not holding brief for the president, but that was what the president, let's not take it out of context, let's say in 2011. But now, a lot of people are saying that Ughelli Sowore was calling for a revolution to be able to topple an incumbent government that had a legitimacy of the people through the ballots. So that's the bone of contention by a lot of people. And when you look at it either ways, That's what they keep complaining about.
All right, you see,
that's why they cite terrorism. That's why they can hold him for 45 days. There's even a law that says, okay, you can do about 56 days. That's a bit of contention.
Well, first of all, I think the argument that we can actually bring him under this terrorism act is ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. It's ridiculous. And nobody can conceivably make an argument.
How about his meeting with the leader of a proscribed group, Nnamdi Kanu, that was in public land, that was on the internet? How about his meeting?
Well,
how about his call for the unconditional release of another leader of a proscribed group? Amen.
And also the video that the state security, the SSS, when they made the application, they based it on a video. That was one of their evidence, where he was saying that after the protest, this government will cease to exist, and also the DSS will cease to exist. So what's your take on that?
All right, you see,
Peniela, you want to come up on this?
Oh, yes, thank you very much, because to begin with, in law, we look at substance rather than the form. When Sowore called for a revolution, and the government has been, laying hands on that word revolution, it was clear how he wanted to achieve his revolution. Those who want to topple government violently don't come on TV to talk about it. And the demands of the movement...
No, but they come on media to talk about it.
After it's done.
No, even before it's done. If you... The revolution you all quote, 1917 revolution, October Revolution, Lenin led. Lenin had a newspaper called Iskra. Iskra constantly talked about a revolution for over 20 years before the Tsar, Nicholas, was toppled.
But you see...
So it was constantly in the media space.
That's fine.
You saying they don't come to talk about revolution in the media doesn't hold water.
Beyond the talking, there must be certain overt acts. Because, for instance, he's talking about the Terrorism Act. Terrorism, according to the Terrorism Prevention Act, is defined as trying to achieve a political gain through violence.
I don't think
there is nothing so far that the revolutionary movement has done that points at violence. So how do you bring, like my colleague has said, that it's unthinkable? It's a case of government looking for the best law that gives them a hiding place to keep Sowore for the longest possible time. While he's in detention, they are now going about to shop for the offense he actually committed.
There's also a video, you talked about a video where you met with Nnamdi Kanu and all that. There's also a video in which he, called for a peaceful participation in this protest. He eschewed violence. He said, we're not going to participate in any violence, that the government, the security agencies may want to provoke you into embarking on violence. But please, do not take the bait. It is a peaceful protest. And they spelled out their demands. They spelled out how they were going to go about it. Let me tell you why the federal government is scared. If that protest had held across the country, it would have reverberated around the world, because it would have drawn attention of the international community to what is going on in Nigeria. Yeah. And the federal government felt threatened because, the confidence is saying this is the direction we want the country to go, and they're laying out to the people, and people are buying it. And the one thing I like about this protest was that it was calling for the participation of all Nigerians, not just members of his own political party, but all Nigerians, regardless of political affiliations, tribal affiliations, and come all out and let us make a statement to the authorities that we are sick and tired of what is going on in the country. Something has to be done. It is an emergency. In my manifesto, in my election, I said that, look, this is an emergency that we are going through right now. Look at all metrics by which you can assess a government. The government has failed on security, on the economy, per capita income, everything is down. And so we cannot keep this facade of elections. Let's just have an elections when they're not going to have, we're not going to have credible results. If you don't,
I was even going. Can I just interject real quick?
Yeah.
You've been very, very adamant on the fact that he was very insistent that it be peaceful, and then they don't take the bait now. So why is it that you find a case that you've had the government arrest somebody who they've not found culpable, and they're still going to have to charge with a crime? Why is it that they've been able to like hold him for so long and are now going around shipping for what to charge him with, as opposed to just going directly and like saying that this is the problem?
Yeah. You see, like I was saying to my colleague before we even came in, because of the security situation of the country, even the courts are really emotional about that Terrorism Prevention Act, the law under which Sowore was detained.
Yes.
You know, because nobody loves terrorism, and everybody knows that the mood of the nation is that we should crack down on terrorism in Nigeria. Now, so the government simply cooked up something, came by way of ex parte motion, and you know ex parte motion in law means that only one person is before the court. The other person is not heard. And that's why Mr. Femi Falana, who is the counsel to Sowore, has gone back to court to go and by an application to vacate the order. So I'm just trying to tell you that the fact that government succeeded in getting that ex parte order doesn't mean that they had approached the court under the right laws. And doesn't mean they have anything with which to hold. I wanted to even speak about the issue of legitimacy,
so let me
which I think is very serious.
I can segue you to legitimacy. Only recently, the Chief Justice of Nigeria said that the judiciary will not be subservient to anybody. What's your reaction to that statement? This is on the heels of the Bar Congress conference going on. It said it will not be subservient to everybody. So, and if you ask the judiciary now, they will say they are not being subservient to anybody. What's your reaction to that?
Of course, you do not expect them to come out and say they will be subservient. It's, it's actions that really count here. The judiciary lately has not really lived up to expectations. If there's any time in our history that the judiciary has to come all out and stamp its independence authority, it is now. Because we now face a threat to the rule of law from the federal government. We now have a situation where the federal government picks and chooses others that it will obey.
Right. Kelly,
there are a number of examples we can cite.
Kelly, you'll come back and cite those examples. We want to hear those examples, all right? Both men will come back after this quick commercial break, and we'll keep the conversation alive. What we're talking about is the protest the African Renaissance Group is having in Washington, D.C. on the 30th of August by 6 p.m. at the Nigerian Embassy in Washington, D.C. So we'll come back and talk more about that after this quick commercial timeout. All right, welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're talking about the impending protest at the Nigerian Embassy on Friday the 30th of August, 6 p.m. Nigerian time in Washington, D.C. You're talking about the way the government has, breached the rule of law and not obtained court order. But quickly, talk about the protest. We'll talk about it for a couple of minutes. You come back to cite these instances. And you have a point to talk about on the independence of the judiciary. Yeah. So how's this process going to be like? Okay,
well, the protest is going to take place on Friday, that's 1 p.m. Eastern Time at the Nigerian Embassy in Washington, D.C. So we are calling on all Nigerians who are in that vicinity to please join this mass movement. We have already submitted a protest letter to the Department of State of the United States, and we are going to shortly also submit a protest letter to members of Congress as a way of mounting pressure on the Nigerian government to accord with common sense, democratic tenets, which is common to civilized nations. We're just trying to jack the nation to its conscience to do what is right. That's what we want to do. So from Nigeria here, we're going to be in full support of the movement, but this action is largely focused on the diaspora as a way of bringing external pressure on what
so
is
the rule of law question, the rule of instances you want to take.
Yeah, a number of instances, but let me just mention just a few. The Dasuki, I think it's a well-known one. That's the prime example. A lot of times there have been court orders, mandated the federal government to release him on bail. But the federal government has cited, national security, that it would be detrimental to national security. So there's Ezazaki, orders for his release, and the federal government has flouted it on same national security, rules. We have to be careful, In the wake of 9/11, the U.S. government enacted what's called the Patriots Act. And it was observed that there were some provisions in it that infringed on personal liberty and all that. Those provisions were struck down by the courts. So you do not, hide under the cloak of national security to infringe fundamental rights, to breach the rule of law.
Fundamental rights are not absolute.
They are not absolute. They have restrictions, of course.
Oh, yeah.
They
But
have procedures.
They have.
They can be derogated from.
Exactly. And in any case, where a court, because before a bail can be granted, the court will consider all the circumstances, will consider a counter affidavit and all of that stuff. So if the court now gives an order, it means that the court has weighed the surrounding circumstances, has weighed the law, and given its ruling. You must abide by it. There was a bar conference, I can't remember, just a few years back, where the president said he was committed to observing the rule of law. So far, what we have seen is inobservant. In fact, he has observed the rule of law more in breach than in compliance. There are instances like that. So we are all now living in fear. And that shouldn't be. You can't be free. You don't feel free anymore to air your mind on issues of national importance. No, we can't have that kind of society. There's a threat now of us being taken back to the days of military dictatorship. And we cannot allow that.
Nkechi, you want to jump in this conversation?
Yes, I just wanted to come back to Mr. Peniela and this petition that you've written to the Department of State in the United States. Some people are really cynical about internationalizing domestic issues. And some may argue that unlike past regimes, President Trump doesn't really care much about Africans. What I want to know is, what do you think the United States bandwidth is in engaging with Sowore's detention?
Oh, well, you see, there is an international human rights community beyond the borders of the U.S. Such a protest holding in Washington, D.C. is not just going to attract the attention of the United States. It's going to, already detention of Sowore is an international phenomenon. So we are not fixated on the United States government. All we are trying to do is to further externalize the struggle and bring in international pressure, on the government of Nigeria. Now, if people have reservations about externalizing domestic issues, that would mean that we are dealing with domestic leaders that are reasonable. With all respect, domestic leaders that embrace the tenets of democracy. For instance, I was going to come in the other time when Comrade Buluku was talking about protests. There's a very, very fantastic statement that Justice Funmilayo Adekeye made in the case of IGP versus AMPP. That's 2008 WRN, page 65. That was when General Muhammadu Buhari, as he then was, himself led a protest after losing an election, and the police cracked down on that protest.
That was the protest that led to the death of former Senate President.
Yes.
Okadibo.
And then they went to court, briefed Mr. Falana, the same man that they are now against by standing with Sowore. And Justice Adekeye made a very strong statement. He said, protests has become a recognized way by which people, citizens, draw the attention of government on important government and government issues by which they express their views, and it has become an internalized and recognized system in civilized nations. And she now made a statement. She said, it's going to be very reactionary, retrogressive, if Nigeria continues to insist that people must get a police permit before they express their view. He said, we must take a cue from other nations who have followed the arduous paths of democracy and are now reaping the dividends. And that is to tell you that she is pricking the conscience of the ruling elite in this nation. We are still military in our tendencies. We have not yet embraced democratic principles. And that's why oftentimes when we cry and cry and cry, nobody's listening to us, we have to cry to the international community. There is no choice. When you cannot stop beat a baby and at the same time stop the baby from crying, you have to pick one.
So how do we become more democratic in our process? What can the bar or the bench do about it? These are the sidelines of the conference currently going on. And some meters away from us, and they said the future. And the opening statement yesterday, Mr. Oyebo did talk about the fact that the economy of the population is going to triple, and we need to make, adequate preparation for the future of the legal profession. Over 105,000 lawyers in the country as we speak today. We've got one lawyer to about 1,900 people in Nigeria, 125 branches of the bar. How do we make it count?
Now, I want to start by talking about the independence of the judiciary. That is a ruse as we speak in Nigeria. Section 158 listed the National Judicial Council as one of the bodies of government that must be independent, that must not be subject to the control of any other organ of government. Now, the same constitution in section 292 and other allied sections makes the appointment of heads of court, including the head of the judiciary, put it in the hands of the president. And where even though on the recommendation of the NJC, but if the NJC recommends a candidate to the president and the president refuses to appoint that candidate, the Constitution did not provide a veto in the NJC, just like you have in the National Assembly. If a bill has been promulgated into law and the president refuses to assent to the bill, the National Assembly can take back the bill and veto. That's true democracy.
If he's got 2/3.
If it goes 2/3. Now, even whether 2/3 or 4/5, the NJC cannot overrule the president. So you remember, there is a very serious case of Justice Ayo Salami, who was alleged of corruption. Even though we knew that at the time he was not doing the biddings of the ruling party, there was a committee set up to investigate. The committee came up and, in the process of the investigation, the then President Jonathan suspended him and that until the conclusion came out. When the conclusion came out, he was found innocent. Okay. The president refused to take him back, even though NJC recommended he should be reinstated. NJC could not veto.
Also, how long it took Onoge to be
look at that. Look at that.
The process itself was questionable.
These are conversations we want to have. These are conversations we want to jump off. I'll quickly bring Sheyi on this.
Yes, I mean,
just to have the final salve on this.
Yes, I mean, we have been talking about, the protest that is coming up, and then we have, like you said, the majority of Nigerians or people that are interested in this story to come forward and protest in Washington, D.C. Yeah. However, what is being done in Lagos, Nigeria, for anybody who is interested in being part of this movement, what's been done here?
Oh, well, in the immediate, we are going to roll out other plans as time goes on. But of course, there have been a lot of protests going on already in Nigeria. Enough protests going on in Nigeria. So we are externalizing it. As time goes on, it depends on how events turn. That's going to influence how we are going to respond to it further. The African Renaissance Organization is a pan-African organization that has come to stay. We are back. We are now in the system. And what we want to do, we want a total systemic change. Okay. A total systemic change.
Okay. We'd like to say a very big thank you to you. It's been a great conversation with Mr. Peniela and Mr. Buluku right here. It's been a great morning.
And we'll be watching out for August 30th for the protest. Well, that brings us to the end of the show today. I am Nkechi Nnanna.
I'm Rafai Hussaini.
And I'm Shaitan Atigari. Thank you for watching. From our entire team here in Lagos, enjoy the rest of your morning. And of course, the rest of your day. Goodbye.